I am a people pleaser, and it might be because I have ADHD. I first stumbled upon the term people pleaser in 2017 or so, about a decade ago. And suddenly I had a word to explain why I couldn't stop saying sorry for simply existing. My friends would often yell at me in exasperation, "Stop saying sorry." I felt like I was a burden, a nuisance, and I needed to blend in, make everyone as comfortable as possible. And thinking back to it, I think a more accurate term is recovering self-sacrificer. I am a recovering self-sacrificer. You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. I spent many years of my life holding back, appeasing, saying, yes, that's fine, and no worries, and whatever works for you. Even though, had I been confident enough to speak my mind, there were worries. I choose the term self-sacrificer because I think it explains what's happening far better. I've been pleasing others at the expense of myself. I see nothing wrong with pleasing others, though. I love pleasing people. I love buying gifts for the people I care about, or surprising them with thoughtful gestures, or showing up for them in ways they never expected. So self-sacrificing is when we are not doing these things out of care and love, but rather because we don't want to be a burden, we don't want to get in the way, and it's at the expense of ourselves. That's why I use that term. So the original podcast question is people-pleasing a part of ADHD? I want the answer to be yes, because it would explain so much about me. So I went on a bit of a research deep dive, and here is what I found. Honestly, it's a little bit messier than I had expected. People-pleasing is not on the official diagnostic criteria for ADHD, and there isn't a single solid study that measures people-pleasing directly and pins it on ADHD. So if someone is confidently saying online that people-pleasing is just an ADHD thing, they might be getting a little bit ahead of the science. But, and this is the part that gets me, ADHD is closely tied to a few things that can absolutely turn you into a recovering self-sacrificer like me. The big one is rejection sensitivity, which is basically feeling criticism or rejection way more intensely than other people seem to. One 2024 study found that ADHD symptoms were closely linked to higher rejection sensitivity. Surprise, surprise. I mean, we've spoken about rejection sensitivity a ton on this podcast, especially in relation to ADHD. And I've had a lot of ADHD experts like Meredith Carter and Tracy Atsuka on the show. Another part, though, when it comes to ADHD is emotional dysregulation, which is when your feelings just hit that much harder and take that much longer to settle down. On top of that, there's masking, which is the exhausting work of hiding your real self to fit in. One study found that over 90% of ADHD adults said that they mask in social situations. So I like to picture all of these things kind of stacking on top of each other and then wondering, where does that leave us? And where I think it leaves us is that if a tiny bit of disapproval feels like the end of the world, then saying, yes, that's fine, and no worries could become a survival mechanism. When we think of rejection-sensitive dysphoria and the research that has been done there, where I think it's 10,000 more negative comments before you're 10 years old, we're going to do whatever we can to avoid those rejections, which is to appease. Of course, if I'm standing my ground and saying, I want to do this, or I don't want you to do that, there is more room for rejection. And if we've experienced those micro rejections over and over and over, we want to limit that. With all that said, though, going from rejection sensitivity straight into people pleasing is something that therapists have noticed or individuals like me have noticed, but it hasn't been properly proven. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. A lot of the experts don't agree on everything. There's an overlap with what the trauma world calls fawning, which means that some of my people pleasing might be less about my ADHD and more about some of the things that maybe happened in early childhood. So for this episode, is people pleasing caused by ADHD? Where does this leave us? I think people with ADHD report more rejection sensitivity and masking, and that people pleasing fits pretty neatly on top of that. I see the pattern. It is a pattern. Like I said, it's not a proven fact. Anecdotally, so with me, making the link has helped me offer more grace to myself. And if my therapist agrees with me, I'm pretty good with that theory. In next week's episode, I'm going to dive into the research on how you can do the work of ending your cycle of self-sacrificing, especially if you live with ADHD or rejection-sensitive dysphoria. So that's it for today. If you enjoyed this episode, though, can I please ask you to stick around for 30 seconds? Creating this content can feel kind of lonely, especially lately. I'm now in the third year of this podcast, and I am wondering, is anyone getting value out of this? Am I putting stuff into the void? I can see that people listen every week, but I've never hear from listeners. So I have just one ask for you. Send me a message if you listen to the show. If you get any value whatsoever, find me on Instagram. It's at Alice Draper, or email me, or send me a message on LinkedIn. I just would love to know you're here. You hear this, and that it's worth putting this content out there. That's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to My Rejection Story. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper.